Okay, welcome to the Bellevue School Board School District meeting for October 21st, 2021. We'll begin with roll call. I'm Francine Wiest.
I'm Carolyn Watson.
Christine Chu. Erica Malik.
Seema Sarafan.
Superintendent Art Jarvis.
All right, and with that, we will go to the Pledge of Allegiance. We have a student joining us, Art Malumba, 7th grader at this school, Highland Middle School, and he'll lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Hart, would you also lead us in the land acknowledgement?
We acknowledge that we are on an indigenous land of the Coastal Salish people who have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Duwamish and Snoquamish tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial. We reflect on the historic context that gives us to reside on this land and accept responsibility to erasure. We commit to an ongoing partnership with the Snoquamish tribe as we speak to, learn from, and lead with their guidance.
Thank you so much. And then we'll go right to your update. So again, thank you for having us at your school today, and we'd love to hear from you.
Highland is what you can call a home middle school. From participating in 7 different classes on a screen to seeing each other through a mask, Highland is like a home which provides fun activity like math, a math club, where you meet up with a friendly teacher and friends. You participate in competition and have fun. Even if you feel a little down in Highland, the Highland staff treats you like family, and they provide pizza and burgers every day for lunch.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. We appreciate you coming and sharing your school with us today.
Thank you.
You are welcome to stay if you want, but I'm sure you're also very busy, so if you need to go, we understand that as well. We'll move on to the other list of our acknowledgements under item.
Before we do that, can we ask him how he's liking the new building since we're
Oh,
about
yeah.
to like
Sure.
open it today?
Art, one more question for you. What do you think of this new building?
What do you like about it? What's working for you?
It's awesome. It's like they got like a huge gym and they have like 2 gyms.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome. What do you use the gym for?
Use it like for basketball and soccer. And like they also have a big football field in like track field too.
Awesome.
Excellent. So good inside and out. Well, we're
Yeah.
doing the ribbon cutting ceremony today.
Okay.
And that's basically like saying opening a present. So even though you've already been in here for a while and the building's been open, we wanted to celebrate this new building and this community that resides here. So we'll be doing that a little later today.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thanks
Bye.
for your perspective.
So item 1.5 has our other acknowledgements. We went through them last time in October, and I also want to highlight that it is National Principals Month. We're very grateful for their leadership, and we'll be extending some additional heartfelt thanks to each of our principals and assistant principals for their leadership in building the communities, and really that trickles down to all of our staff in our buildings who support our students. And with that, that brings us to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
A second.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of the agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the agenda is approved. That brings us to item 2, which is the consent agenda. I move that we approve the consent agenda.
I second.
All right, is there any discussion?
Okay, just funny that we hired a coach, but we don't know what school or what he's coaching.
There did seem to be one omission there. Would it be possible to get that updated?
We'll get that updated. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. All right, anything else? And then I think the other thing is the 2.5, it did say for the November 4th meeting, but it is on today's agenda, so I would take that that date will be corrected on the actual memo since it will be approved at this meeting.
Need to modify the motion.
To do that, I think it's just in the for board meeting date. So I will take that as an administrative correction that needed to be made.
We will make that correction.
All right, thank you. Anything else? All right, all those in favor of the consent agenda?
Aye.
All right, the consent agenda stands approved. That brings us to superintendent updates. Dr. Jarvis.
Thank you, Dr. Weiss, members of the board, members of the public. It's my pleasure as superintendent to, I guess, go through a number of items and try to do it in the time allotted. The first thing I would note is the one that's already been noted, and that is that this is ribbon cutting event for Highland Middle School. And a quick explanation for the public that this school was completed in the midst of the pandemic. So the normal ribbon cutting and grand opening that might have taken place did not take place. And we felt it was just high time, since we have school open and running this fall, to celebrate the gift from the community of the support to build this beautiful school and see it operating with students, and to take a few minutes to do the formality that otherwise would have been missed for the lifetime of this building, unlike all the other new buildings. So we certainly encourage people to come back. But it is our pleasure as we begin the next round of capital construction to celebrate the beautiful, beautiful buildings that have been built, and to thank all the public as well as the people who made it work. My second item is also a celebration, and that is, you may have seen in the Times that Interlake High School again topped the list of National Merit Scholarship semifinalists. And as you look at basically the numbers of semifinalists in the Bellevue School District, I think there was a reference that the Bellevue School District got an A+ because of the kids that are here. But for the school district as a whole, there are 80 semifinalists in this school district alone. 12 at Bellevue High School, 40 at Interlake, 4 at International School, 20 at Newport. And the reality is that most states in the union have somewhere between 180 and 220 national semifinalists. So Bellevue could almost hold its own as the 51st state in terms of international merit semifinalists. That has been a tradition, I know, of Bellevue, and I certainly can't claim any credit, but it does make you swell with pride to be affiliated with Bellevue and recognize that kind of consistent achievement over time. I think there were those that wondered with the interruption of the pandemic whether that would change circumstances, and the fact is our kids are extraordinarily talented and well educated, and I just offer that as an item that needs to be mentioned, and a credit to everyone who's been involved. A second award I would like to comment on is one for Stevenson Elementary. And Stevenson Elementary has been awarded a national award from TASH. And it's called the June Downing Breakthrough in Inclusive Education Award. Many people may not be familiar with TASH. And TASH is a name now all by itself. I think they abandoned the words that used to represent it. It's just an organization. But it's a national organization committed to disabled children and adults. And in this case, Stevenson has won a very prestigious award for the inclusion and the data that represents this school district and the children and the service at Stevenson. So certainly our commendation to the entire staff, the leadership, and to you, board, for the work you've done in inclusion, and we celebrate Stevenson in that award. I want to mention a topic that's, I guess, been with us for certainly these 18 to 20 months, that is COVID and the ongoing update. But in this case, Monday represented a day unlike any that I have seen in my entire career. That was a deadline for all staff to be vaccinated, to make sure that the public health, student health, the staff health was ensured in every way possible. I would start my comment on a tremendous thank you to our staff. Our staff stepped forth. They started in a pretty good place. They were already heavily vaccinated, and others stepped forth. We had a few that chose otherwise, to either wait to see or disagree that they simply didn't want that. But for all practical purposes, we did not lose a teacher. We have a person here and there. Mostly what it did was forced us as a district to clean up our substitute list and figure out who was actually active and not. We lost some off that list that we never heard from in terms of compliance. But we experienced basically a 97% compliance, and the balance, just as an awareness of how it works. There were a certain number of people who requested exemptions, either for medical and or religious reasons. Those were dealt with one by one and very independently. And then the second question was whether or not there could be an accommodation in the school district for someone who had an exemption. And if in fact there could be an accommodation, all the conditions for that accommodation were put in place, and if there could not be accommodation or an exemption and someone chose not to be vaccinated, they did in fact separate from employment and eligibility on Monday afternoon at 4:30, and the district, in my opinion, the HR department is exhausted. In fact, our HR director is out ill today, and I suspect it's the consequence of some long days that they put in to make sure it was handled well. But my compliments to the staff, my compliments to the HR department, my compliments to the district, the community as a whole. Our status right now with the staff and students in terms of eligible.
Turning it on and off and just leave it
We'll
off.
just
It's
leave it
so
off,
jarring.
and
to
I'll
have
just
it.
run by the light of my laptop.
It appears that we may be close to eligibility for vaccination for children ages 5 through 11. And if our staff and our grade 6 through 12 students are any indication, that will take place very quickly. Our district has already made alignment with Safeway, happens to be the vendor that is providing vaccination opportunities for the students as soon as they become eligible. We have multiple clinics in the school, but it's actually being done by an outside agency, but with our full blessing and support to schedule that in the schools. So it appears that may be coming soon, and we'll try to expedite it just as fast. We actually had a clinic scheduled for Saturday if it had been approved by that time, but we will move forward. I would also add in the COVID world that the Bellevue School District has a testing program underway, and I think you're aware of that as a board, but make sure the public understands. We have 2 types of COVID testing taking place in the schools. One of those is a pooled surveillance testing. And what that would work in the fashion and idea for pooling of testing would be that we might, the 6 of us might agree that we're all being tested. We're saying that individually, but our tests go together in a pool. And as long as the result comes back that that pool has no positive results, we know we're in good shape, and there's no individual. It's faster and easier and more economic to do it that way. and it works well. It also allows that should there be a quarantine that involves someone else, that I've been pooled surveillance, I know I'm okay and I don't have to go out on a close contact quarantine. But I also want to note the second kind of testing that's underway, and that's the availability of diagnostic testing. So that if I happened to get a runny nose today and I was a little suspicious that I needed to get a test, I could immediately, I could take that diagnostic test, I could get the results back quickly, and that would help me know what the next step is and what's there. So it has provided us a level between the two types of testing of an additional layer of a countermeasure, a safety mechanism, and the feedback from staff is that it's very comforting to be able to know that if they have a need, they can move quickly. If the pool testing works for them and they want to do that regularly, weekly, they can do that and stay calm. So COVID testing, in addition to the vaccination, is a very solid combination. Together with the student vaccinations, it puts us in a good place. We will continue to depend on masks as really one of our other mainstays. Lastly would be both a request of those in the state and health department on behalf of school districts. Contact tracing that has fallen kind of to the schools to do. If someone is positive, then there's a matter of trying to figure out the contact tracing and then trying to figure out the quarantine that results. I think it's fair to say that every school district in the state would sign the letter that says you've got to come up with a better way of doing this. It's going to have kids in quarantine who don't need to be there because you can't identify that well. We're adding staff. We continue to add contact tracers and build that. But then just to finish that on a little higher note, we also got financial support for helping offset the cost of contact tracing and testing. So there's approximately $323,000 grant that's been received by the school district. And congratulations to Heather Edlund and that whole crew that really has consistently kept us in touch with anybody that's willing to help us from the state health department or other agencies. So we do have some financial support to help us offset some of the burden of additional staffing as we deal with that. I'm sorry?
Who's that from?
I will find out who that's from. I think it's directly through OSPI, and I'm assuming that's part of their ESSER funds, but I will confirm that one. I may have a paper here. I can do it quickly, but I'll dig for it. Then I want to switch quickly to three other topics before I'm done. One is that people are going to witness a lot of activity now beginning on education about levies and the expiring levy, the levy renewal. And I just want to use this opportunity as we pass resolutions setting the levy, setting an election, that I, as a superintendent, will be willing to meet people probably wherever they are. If that's 3 people and a cup of coffee, if that's an organized group or a disorganized group, I'd be happy to. My part of it as superintendent is to try to provide the education piece of what is this all about? Why does the school district need it? How do the numbers work for us? I know that Melissa DeVita will be at my side anytime we need, or if I can't do it, she will do it and others will fill in. But it's tremendously important for people to understand that when this levy expires, it will go away unless it's renewed by the community. And they have steadfastly supported the schools and renewed the EPNO, the Educational Program and Operations levy. And we will be asking to renew that for 4 years. So I just want to put the word out that I'm available on an education platform to talk about the levy anywhere. Two other items. One is enrollment. I wanted to give you a quick look at, it's been interesting to hear other people interpreting our enrollment. We all know that we did suffer enrollment loss in terms of the pandemic and what was available. But just the highlight would be what typically the school districts use October enrollment for many, many purposes. We do take enrollment counts monthly, but October tends to be the gold standard for determining the size and relation of the districts. So very quickly, if I were to give you, I'll just read you the numbers from the last 3 years and then the current year. In 2018-19, there were 20,272 students in Bellevue. In 2019-20, it shows a plus 23. As you all know, the year 2019-2020 finished in an odd, incomplete fashion, so they froze the numbers, but technically there was a gain from October of 18 to October of 19 of 23 students. And then for 2021, the October number dropped just by 750 students to 19,545. And for this October, it dropped another 737 students total. So there's about a 1,500 student loss to the school district. And we'll be working to see how much of that can be regained over time and how much of it had to do with the nervousness of just whether it was okay to open school. Dr. Malik?
I would be interested to know come January what the numbers are, given that vaccines will be available for kids. October 26th is the day that they're meeting to probably approve it. It's just some.
I think it might be probably a good idea for me to sort of give those numbers publicly every month after we watch it, because part of that we've never experienced before is with this kind of an offset of some students moving to online programs, private schools or wherever the homeschooling is. We've tried hard to make sure that we hold a place for them in our classrooms and availability for them to come back when they're ready to come back. And I think, as you say, by the time the students are vaccinated, I think it will cross that next threshold in some people's minds of even safer than before.
So what was the total number for this October?
The which?
This October?
This October is 18,808 students. So just under 19,000. So that Bellevue is still one of the larger school districts in the state of Washington, and go back to where we started, just extraordinary quality, and we'll go forth from there.
Sorry, Art, I asked Mike if he might offer the microphone. It helped so much when hearing this.
I can do it.
With the mask on, I thought it might be useful.
Thank you. I wanted to add, I think, especially on Melissa's behest and the department she serves, I wanted to again speak at least briefly to the nutrition. And as Melissa has been sharing with us, Melissa DeVita that's one of the programs that she serves as nutrition. She noted that in September of this year, we served just under 190,000 lunches, unheard of in Bellevue School District. We've never served those kind of numbers, and we're usually one of the districts that serves a fairly low percentage because we don't have a high count of free lunches and free and reduced lunch. This fall has changed much. The lunches are available to all, and they're available without charge. And in addition to the fact that we've had issues with can we get a full staff, and secondly, issues with the supply chain, such as milk and chicken and other things, we've had this tremendous increase in the demand. And I think the bottom line to that one is to, every time we see one of our people associated with nutrition, is to say thank you. They have done an absolutely amazing job. And Melissa tries to remind the world that that's happening, and they're making it happen for young people. We may not have as many choices as we sometimes have had, but we're serving a lot of lunches to a lot of children, and it's really working well, and we say thank you to that crew. The last item I would mention really isn't me mentioning it. I'm going to ask Heather Edlin to join me and answer the question, but it's that time of year where the question, and it has already come up on counseling and kids applying for college, and the fact that we are back and we're in session and it's different than last year, and last year was different than the year before. But I thought to just approach Heather directly, have her share with you briefly the counseling model that we use and the expectation of counselors and how they help kids, and where we stop, and in many cases where parents ask for other support. So Heather, if you would jump in on that one, I would appreciate it.
Sure, and just say I'm a poor substitute for Patty, but she may have heard she had a family emergency. So typically Patty does work with our college and career counseling component. And I typically manage the mental health. However, I did spend some time today talking to both Maria and Scott Powers to talk a little bit about our college counseling program, to get just a little bit more information, and then we will provide more in the report that comes to you on Monday. So you'll get more detail then. But
Heather, does that microphone work?
I have no idea. I know it's having staff back there, it's really hard to hear.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were about. She's got one, I think.
I don't know if
it's enabled.
This one?
I might.
They both turn
I
off.
see the red light on that one.
Yeah, there's shades.
This one?
It doesn't work when you're like subtly touching it, but then as soon as you're like aggressively in there, it just decides it's time to work. Thank you. Okay, so as I was mentioning, we will send a more complete synopsis in the Monday report that comes to you. But I did spend a few minutes today talking with Maria and Scott to talk about what's happening for our high school students. And so I think the first thing is questions that are specific about each school. There are college planning pages for each school that list the timelines of all the events that have happened for each school. So I have links to all of those. And so all of the students will have their senior blitz appointments. They are following up with kids who did not reach out to them for their senior blitz appointments. At those, they do go over any questions about the college application process, any questions they have about graduation requirements or their specific college applications for the schools that they're interested in. They also review with the students all of their transcripts for any inaccuracies. So every student gets that. And then in addition, there are other optional items that the students can participate in. And they do start in the junior year, so we don't just wait until they're seniors and close to the deadline for an application process. But starting all the way from FAFSA and WAFSA, filling out and completing those, different types of invitations to test prep, those also are available in Naviance for all students. So not something that kids need to go outside of the district to participate in. They can participate in those through Naviance. They do also have their junior blitz appointment, which comes in the spring to help prepare them for anything that they might want to do over the summer. There are summer options too. So it didn't just start this year. Reviewing their list of colleges, adding information to their Naviance account starting their Common Coalition application, and then checking the charts of deadlines. We do also offer some college essay optional offerings for the summer. This year we did have, I think, more kids than we've ever had sign up for those. So we did expand the opportunities based around the enrollment. So we didn't cap it or anything like that. When we had more people, we just got more staff to help cover that for the students. And then the timelines actually break it out by each month of the senior year. So what happens in September, October, November, and we'll make sure you get a copy of each of these items.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Heather. I know the caveat you started with is a fair one. I just wanted to pass along so that maybe, I think I have already let Dr. Jarvis know, and I think Mr. Harrison was there to hear it, but we had at least a few parents who were saying, this is the plan, but it has not worked out that way for my child. And I'm sharing this because, as you know, there's deadlines, and there are some that are relevant for literally 2 weeks from now. So there were parents who were saying, my child has not had that outreach, or my child seems unaware of the plan. And I know at least one or two of those people to be people who I think are reliable and probably did do some digging. So I think the question is, is there anything you can speak to about what action should that parent or student take if they feel that they're in that situation where things were supposed to happen, but they haven't happened for them? What should they be doing?
Yeah, thank you for that. So I think it's always, we always recommend that people go closest to the point of implementation to start with, right? So if they have a concern about something that they felt like, well, should have happened or hasn't happened yet, to start with our student's counselor. Right, the person who would have been having that direct conversation with them and find out what has happened or has not happened with that. But if they're not getting that, then they would continue to go through the chain of command. So they would go through then to that school administrator, et cetera. So they should start with the school counselor to find out what has been happening with that. And I would say too, just as I always do, if you're finding out about specific situations, I know you don't always want to tell us who those are, but it's much easier for us to support students and families when we know the specific cases that are occurring, and then we can identify if there's an issue that's more like broad than just for this individual, right? So it does help us to say, if we kind of get one example, then we can say, and how many other, kids are in this alphabet area or what have you, to identify a particular concern.
That's a great call out. I agree on the stress test of the system. I think John Harrison and Tish Gasparich were participating in the call, so I think they can feed that information
perfect
back in, and you can determine if there's maybe specific pockets.
That's great. Thank you.
So I want to add to some of this, because there are a lot of things that come up in the category of college application support, and this is, as Director Serafin mentioned, it is a little bit of a recurring theme. And as the board, it's not our job to manage those details day to day and to try to fix them and try to decide what to do, but it is our job to advocate, and it is our job to oversee. And I want to put some other data on the table about this, because I think it needs a bigger look. I think that in the next 2 weeks, it would be great to follow up with those families who need help right now, because there's a lot of kids who have applications due on November 1st and they need help now. So great, follow up with that. But if we just step back a little bit and take that board role, I talked to one of the counselors recently, and they are completely overwhelmed right now. They are dealing with the screening at the high schools. They are dealing with the screening of the students for the mental health issues. They are dealing with scheduling the on-site SATs, which was on top of the other test day 2 weeks previous. They don't have access to teachers, or 2 days ago, they didn't have access to teachers to actually staff that testing with. So they were scrambling and spending hours and following up with individual families about who's taking tests. They are doing all those appointments that you're talking about, plus trying to chase down the kids who didn't follow through and schedule that appointment. But when I see that, it makes me wonder. That system sounds like it's set up to best serve those kids who take initiative and have support, because those are the ones who know to go to that system. That system doesn't have a lot of space in it for going out and reaching out to kids who maybe don't know what to ask for and we'll miss deadlines and we'll miss opportunities, even though we sort of have the check boxes in place. It's one thing to have check boxes in place, and it's another to help kids get through experiences like applications and financial aid and tests that are just not part of their home culture because they weren't, like maybe their parents didn't go to school or they went to school in a different country or whatever. And so I am wondering, if we are committed to doing this equitably, this isn't a diss on our counselors. Our counselors are doing crudloads of work with great intentionality, real passion. And in addition to all the stuff that I said, the number of kids applying early to colleges this year has gone up by more than 5x.
Wow.
So the load on them is just like staggering. Like, can you imagine having 30 kids to write recommendations for in the next 2 weeks? I can't. Like, that's just staggering. So I'm trying to figure out if we, in giving feedback, not just advocacy, but oversight feedback, should be asking if the programming and the budgeting and the structure of that programming is really the right thing to have in place. I'm not going to solve this problem here tonight. I'd just like to raise the issue and suggest that I think I saw a college and career deep dive in the spring. And I'm wondering if we should think differently about it, if this is part, like, we're so proud of all these kids and their accomplishments and we're listing them and celebrating them. How can we support it and make it more accessible to more kids? Is this somewhere? So that's what I just wanted to put there.
So before we keep going on this topic, just in the interest of time, we are having a deep dive study session. So I understand that there was some urgency around it because there's these looming deadlines and we want to support our students. So if we can have that addressed, and then when we get to the session, the topic on study sessions, we could determine whether this is one that needs to be moved up in the consideration. But rather than getting further into this topic at this time,
No.
you have one more thing you want to
yes,
say?
I-
All right, Director wants one thing, and then we need to move on.
I just wanted to ask, I know our, funding situation and everything, but what is the number of students that a counselor has to serve? It's 300 and something, or is it more than that? And how many seniors do they have to serve? Because, we talked about how, occasionally there's this unicorn counselor that does like this fabulous job. And I know that my son experienced that here in this school district. She had 70 seniors and she didn't have all this testing stuff to follow up on. So those are my questions. Like, what is the load on these folks?
I guess I will pull that one back and say, we can bring you the data on the number of counselors, the purpose, how they're differentiated, and that can all be part of that study. So we will bring that to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather.
Do you have additional items on your report?
No, I just wanted to note that I had 3. I had posted the priority investments, and I posted the academic updates, and we posted the, I read through my fogged up glasses, universal assessment will take place. So those are all posted as part of the superintendent. I just didn't plan on speaking to those this evening.
On the universal assessments one, can we get that posted again so that it's in the right orientation, because it's cut off and that we don't have all the data on the SEL column?
Okay,
Thank
we'll
you.
do that.
Any other questions or comments for what's been reported or these additional reports here? All right, I'll just express my appreciation for getting that academic update and follow up to our questions last time. And I see that it's actually not just for the board, which is great. It's usable for all the people in our buildings to really understand where we stand right now, and that it's divided not only in terms of the testing that's occurred, but also looking at the cohort data so that there's comparisons. So I think having that information is very useful. And then I appreciate also seeing kind of the next steps and kind of action plans in order to be able to support our students. Is there anything else? Okay, so thank you very much, Dr. Jarvis. So that moves us to public comment. Do we have any public comment? All right, so I will just say that the board does appreciate and value public comment, although we're not required to have it by the Open Public Meetings Act. We certainly do For those who were not able to attend today and deliver public comment in person, we received public comment via email and phone, board@bsd405.org, and the phone number is also posted. You can leave it in the language of your choice. We did receive several comments since the last meeting that we received, all the board members consumed, and those will be listed in the minutes later on. So with that, we'll move on to item 5, which is Tier 2 goals update. Dr. Jarvis.
I'm just trying to get this to slide down. I apologize. So what we have put in front of you tonight is a proposal, and by way of a quick background, the district's strategic and annual planning process really spelled out what should happen. The reality of Tier 1 goals and Tier 2, I feel like I'm off on a moving train here, but I'm trying to catch up with really what the board has asked for in the past and what is working. We're going to spend time on the 26th in a study session with the board looking at reporting and the efficacy of the reporting and what's there. And the question has been really one of on Tier 2 goals. They were not included, and the proposal is that we adjust the Tier 2 goal requirements by moving them to the purview of the superintendent, specifically as Tier 2 goals mean they're at the department level, they're at the how-to, and that we will continue to create the department goals, but they would not need to be approved by the board as Tier 2 goals. You shift the responsibility to the superintendent for oversight and accountability at that level. So the essence is the Tier 1 goals become the main anchor for the board, and the question is whether or not our Tier 2 goals are in fact supporting and leading to that. So as you look at the rationale, I realize this is a shift, and we're trying to balance. I think you've used the word in the past of seeking balanced governance. And what is the role of the board in the oversight versus what becomes inadvertent micromanagement at a level that goes into the superintendent's staff or the superintendent's responsibilities. So in essence, that's the proposal that's being presented to you as a request for consideration and change as we deal with it. But it also recognizes that on the 26th, we're going to have a session, really a lengthy session for working through what are the policies, the expectations, the oversight the board would like to end up with. Has it been working, and is it working, and what's the best way to approach that? So I guess we're angels fear to tread, but I'm putting in front of you a proposal that we look at Tier 2 goals differently than Tier 1 goals. And I do recognize that of a whole history long before I joined you, but I would ask for that consideration.
Are you asking for do you have a request for a vote tonight, or are you looking just to vote this out and discuss it?
So currently it's listed as for discussion and information because we do have the workshop. However, we had set a deadline for October. And so just the way the meetings are falling, we did commit to, or the district committed to bringing this to the board in an October meeting. So we're doing that, although we have the meeting next week, the workshop, which is also a meeting. So we could take action that time after further discussion. This was an opportunity to put forward information for directors to consume and to ask questions. And I'll note that I think There has been some confusion in the terminology, although the terminology is also in the policy. So I see that we have 5 main goals as a district in our strategic plan. Our annual plan focuses on 4 this year, and then the others are more like objectives, right? There are ways that help us go towards those goals, and that's slightly different. But that terminology is confusing, and I think part of this, either by calling them sub-goals or something else, could help clarify that. And then certainly we can start that discussion now, but we will keep it limited because we have set aside 3 hours for this topic.
And just a direct answer from my standpoint, I did not expect an answer or action, but I just wanted to begin the conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, Director Chu.
All right, so I am super excited about something in this adapted plan. I think one of the places where we've fallen down the most with using these tier 2 goals is that they're not being used. They ended up being a reporting exercise and not something that was driving the work. And so what I see here is a shift to, and a commitment to actually have goals that will drive work. And that the goals themselves are not set or established by the board or with the approval of the board. So I think that's going to be a huge leap ahead. And I think I am deeply grateful for the commitment to retain this commitment to having goals. Like Francine said, I don't think you need to make fancy vocabulary. These aren't, I think you just call them the targets for the year. Like that's what we do with the equity commitments. We have targets for the year, but we have grand goals that we're heading towards, but we have targets each year. So this makes sense to me. I have 2 questions that I just want to throw out there. One is, if we don't have a study session on something, in what way will the board get to have some level of insight into what those goals were and how well execution went, not as an evaluative body per se, but more as an informed oversight body to understand how everything's fitting together? That's
the short answer is and here we are, we talked earlier, enrollment, we're a district of 19,000 kids. So it's very hard to just look at the entire framework. So your best options are 2. One is by sampling and one is by example. Then part of the evaluation of the superintendent becomes if I only show you the one that I'm working on hard, the other 27 departments are not working, I'm the one responsible for that. But at the same time, I get a chance to show you by sample and by example how it's working. What does the system look like? What's the oversight and the expectation?
So those are the study sessions, those are the deep dives,
yeah.
But I just want to know where we get to see the others.
So you would see, assuming we're not approving them, you would see them for information, and we would say, and this is the one, or these are the 2 that we're going to bring to the board for a more extended example of how it's working.
But will they be wrapped into the end of the year annual report? Will there be anything that sort of checks based on that?
I think that would be a waste. It's an opinion, but I would say that should be as the school year goes along. You need to be able to see if in fact, not as an autopsy, but rather a living document. This is how it's working.
So for example, if you look, because it's our next item agenda under 6.2, so where we have the study session topics and schedule, it also includes reports. So it's not just the study sessions, but an insight into all the departments over the course of the year. Whereas previously we just got one goal. So I don't want to pick on a particular department, but for example, there might be a department that had one specific goal and maybe we heard about that. But there's a lot of other things that are of interest in the department. They're operational, but it gives us a sense of what the experience is like for the people in the system. And so getting a broader report, and then how they're also pushing towards our main goals. So maybe it might be a department where it's more around social emotional support for students and what's going on in there. And then we rotate over time. So there's only so many study sessions to do deep dives, but we get an informational report that drives towards the larger goals and gives us oversight, and better insight into the department as a whole. So it actually would be a much richer and also more useful for the departments, for our superintendent, and for us.
That's fine. We don't have to go into too detail. We have the workshop. The second question that I have is for the equity commitments that we have as a district. We have committed to our community that for all of the district equity commitments, we will have some kind of target each year to show progress in each of those areas, that we are fully committed to those. And it was supposed to be in our annual plan, and I didn't see a comprehensive set of those in the annual plan. I saw some mapping, but I didn't see all of it. And so I just wanted to know, am I remembering wrong? Like, is there actually a comprehensive mapping in the plan that we passed? Or has there been an update? Because I expected that to come in with the tier 2 piece. And so I just want to be clear on the extent to which that's been integrated.
Here, but I will get back to you with an answer, a definitive answer. I just don't know the answer.
Thank you.
I would just add maybe it sounds silly to say, but how do you bring joy back into work after a tough couple of years? It's been my experience, if we're doing it right, we put some of the departments and some of the staff in front of you. The biggest problem is going to be whoever's sitting in the chair, because they're going to be so enthusiastic, you're going to have difficulty keeping them within the minutes allowed. Because people really enjoy being in front of the board when they can get a chance to share what they've been working on and have successes, and you get to see that, and you get to know that it's very real and it's very much embedded in that staff. And that's part of what I would like to bring to you, is kind of the problem of you have to figure out how to cut them off, or I do. You're going to hold it responsible, but it's because they're really enthusiastic and excited to share with you the progress they're making and the work that they've been doing.
Any other questions or things to prepare for the upcoming longer workshop session? Anything else?
No, thank you.
I think for me to prepare, I'm always just afraid that we're forgetting something. So I need to go into the universe of things that we should be forgetting and see. Yeah.
Well, that brings us then to item 6, and that might help a little bit. So
yeah.
We as the executive committee have been working with the superintendent and a couple of other staff members to have a robust system. After we have this discussion, there will be a chart created that has the departments and what's happening over the course of the year, so you can easily see that, and then that becomes the template for the next year. Not to say that it has to be the same, but that it could rotate so that we cover. So for example, we did essentially a school visit, but through many schools, for our CTE program. So that's not listed as a study session. It's not listed there. It doesn't mean that it didn't happen. So we're still working to capture that, that there is a tour, if you will, through all of the departments in major areas, either in a report or a study session. So Dr. Darks, did you want to comment more on the proposal?
I think I'll just let it stand and probably say, I know I took too much time earlier. I'm trying to help you move, but no, I'm comfortable just moving into the conversation.
Okay. Are there questions or comments on the proposed schedule?
No, I think it'll be good. And I like the way we're getting more in depth on things. But what I liked about the old system from a couple of years ago was that I always felt pretty sure that I was hearing about everything in the district. And that was really great, especially in your first year on the board, because if you manage to get through a year of board meetings, you really have some understanding about everything. And so I think it'll be possible here with this new approach that will, with luck, go into greater depth. But I think I will be taking out my checklist and cross-referencing and just making sure, because that's how I am.
I will let you know.
I would just say I had a different perspective. Like I found a lot of breadth, but not enough depth. And I didn't really learn that much. So it might have been, meaning I didn't find that the broad swath view was necessarily help me understand it. Okay. I prefer, I mean, what I'm hearing is there's a level of deference on what is maybe arguably more on the non-instructional operational side. We will hear what seems to be relevant to the superintendent. That will be his judgment. And if he, I guess the term would be cherry picks. If he cherry picks and only tells us about the good stories, then that's an evaluation issue of us for the superintendent. I kind of prefer that because I found that I got overwhelmed by too much information and it was distracting for me from the instructional information. So it's a different take than yours. I'm not saying mine's more
Well,
correct,
hopefully this
but
would be an
I think
improvement.
this would be better.
Yeah.
For me, this is better.
Right, yeah. But no, I wasn't saying that the
No,
old
I
way would be
hear
better.
you.
It's just
Yeah.
that there was an advantage to the old way.
Yeah,
in my
I'm just saying,
perspective.
as the new person on the board at the time, I didn't find it more
Okay.
helpful.
So I think
found
that
it
I
more
will say that I did take this, so people can't see, but it's the annual plan. And then it had all of the lists previously and checked it against this
Oh, good.
list. And we
Yeah.
made sure that there was everything there. Technology and instructional technology have been merged into one. And then there were additional topics that board directors suggested. And those were either incorporated into here, and I think almost all of them were covered, or we also have a list that says that, like, there's a couple, for example, I said it would be nice if we had an overview all in one place on our green initiatives, right? So we might hear a little bit in capital and facilities, we might hear a little bit in transportation, we might hear it, but maybe that, but not for this year, it could be for next year, right? So we're also keeping track of those that might be future topics. So we did cross-check it, and then we'll have, again, one more list that you could then maybe alphabetize that you could see and then see it across this way. So there'll be one more version for people who like to see information in different ways so that you can also track that over year to year, year over year. Yeah, Dr. Chu.
All right, I just want to say, I think this might be a nice evolutionary step that kind of walks the balance of what the two of you are saying, because I think that what I hear the intent is, who knows if it'll execute, right? Like, you can try to do something and it goes wherever it goes. But the intent here is to get us focused, right? One of the things that we said is we need focus and depth and the spaces that we're trying to head. And I like, a more limited set, but having that, I think what Francine just alluded to is having that larger set list so that next year we'll catch the ones we didn't catch this year. So I would encourage us to not lose that list, because that master checklist is a good one to just check against. The second thing, though, that I want to ask about is one of the things we tried to do with the tier 1 and tier 2 goals that we did not succeed with, what we tried to do was get a little more focused on the quality of experiences and outcomes for our kids. So, like, I think the thing that came up earlier tonight of we have all these things in place where the kids are supposed to get all the college supports they need, and we can report on all those activities we're doing and the number of kids who check those boxes. But then we had tons of kids who come in, or a bunch of kids who come in, and they didn't get those services, and their experience didn't have that quality, and it didn't have the outcome that they needed. And so the one sort of question I have is, how do we make sure that these reports really are helping us focus laser-like on those things that we said we're going to improve the quality of this, or we're going to improve this initiative, the experience of these kids, or whatever it is that we're going to, that we're trying to create or make better or add. How do we make sure that we're getting that quality result or experience that we want, as opposed to telling us about what's happening in the department and what the activities are of the department?
I honestly believe it's doable, and the way it's doable is to, as you would study hear about a department, to listen and learn, but also to bring up, okay, in addition to what we've accomplished, what are some of the areas that we still on our need list, on our want list, and eventually, I'm going to bring Melissa back into it. Eventually, we're going to be doing a budget preparation in that process of trying to decide what are the priorities. If I can hire another 10 staff members, if I have that opportunity, would they be counselors if we've got needs there? The reality is you're going to do what you've had to do for years, even with pre-McCleary. I can't address them all. I want to make some choices, and those are hard choices because they're almost always choices between things that are very good. They will work and they do have value and they touch kids differently in the school system. So it's not quite that metaphor of whether, you know, I want to buy an A car or a B car. This one is really one that you will see the places that come up short and where we can add more staff. And I think that's.
I don't think that's the question I'm asking. I know we can't do everything. Okay. The question I'm asking is, let's say you make a choice and we're going for choice A, just because whatever. How do we make sure that our orientation in operation and reporting and monitoring and decision-making is oriented around how successfully we are making progress towards A?
Well, again, one of the keys, and I guess I said it earlier in my own way, is that my belief, and this is, you're going to hear me say it, is that as a board, if you're trying to manage the district on all the components, A, it's going to suck off the life out of your family and all of your job and time, and B, it really doesn't work for you at trying to do that from a board level. So to some extent, you're gonna, if it's clear that we're trying to improve the guidance counseling for careers and we're gonna add staff to that, then you're holding me accountable. That's one of the things that I need to be able to show you what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, and the choice that we made. Or if I've just taken the staff or the hearing and then blew it off, you get to hold me entirely responsible for that's not okay. That's so I would say in a pure balanced governance, and whatever term you want to use, that's the one that says at some level we'll set the direction as a board. The superintendent has got to be capable of carrying that off for you.
I don't think I'm asking clearly enough because what you're saying isn't answering my question at all.
Okay.
It's not. The question that I'm asking is if we're trying to get to an outcome A that we've set the direction for, and now we need to monitor and oversee. That's like our job, right? Is to see, are we getting, did that progress get made? Then we can hold you accountable for whether or not it did. But we need to see if that progress got made. How do we make sure that these reports are going to be focused on whether or not the progress got made and not just on a litany of activities that have been done and investments and strategies that were executed as opposed to outcomes and accomplishments?
I'm going to assume on the 26th, we're going to address that one head on because I think that's a real key in both the policy and the practice, how we carry it out. And then ultimately it will be, I hate to say, but it will be a trust and verify kind of routine. So I don't want to.
No, I agree. That's exactly what I was going to say. I think that's the agenda for the 26th, and there's been several pre-steps that directors have been providing input, staff has been providing input. So we're going to come to that meeting with a rich set of information to buttress the discussion. Thanks. Yeah. Anything else? All right. So there 6.1 and 6.2 are listed as for information, and then 6.3 is listed as action. So, but essentially 6.2 would become a tab and intermeshed with 6.3. So we're really going to vote on 6.2 and 6.3. And I will take what was said previously that potentially we might alter something like counseling, see if it could be potentially moved up a little sooner in the year. But right now that's the schedule. And so that staff have time to work and prepare. Like, for example, I really wanted to do future middle schools next month, but they're not ready. So that's going to happen in the spring. So we can certainly make requests, but right now that has been worked with staff to determine what a good cadence is and when they would have information available for the discussion. So for now, that's how it will stand, but we will take a look at that counseling piece. So I move that we approve the board governance calendar with the addition of the study session topics and schedule as another tab there, and then also with another cross view that will be created.
I second the motion.
Okay, is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's 5 ayes. It passes. So we have our board governance calendar. Thank you very much to all the staff who worked very hard on this and who will be contributing to all the information that will be going forward. So that brings us to item 7. Dr. Jarvis, will Mr. McLeod be presenting?
Mr. McLeod is invited to step forth and present. Again, I guess just want to, by way of introducing Jack, we're here this evening for the event later to do ribbon cutting, the type of thing that honors the 50 years of investment in this district. Thank you, Jack.
Welcome, it's been a pleasure, and we're working on getting all the lights working here. It's a very sophisticated system, so still has to have that human intervention from Mr. Bartz. Thank you very much. So next time you're back, everything will be working. I'm here requesting that we would have award a contract for architectural engineering services for the new transition building. And we have 2 pieces of property just east of Highland here off on the other side of 152nd that we purchased several years ago for the purpose of being able to go ahead and provide a transition services building for the adults, students with disabilities from 18 to 21 years of age that was not necessarily associated with a school campus as we have at Interlake. And so anyway, we have the property here and we've done a feasibility study that knows that we can go ahead and develop a facility that will serve the needs very well for that. And so we are here requesting a contract for Sierra Martin Architects in the amount of $1,898,348, including $30,000 for reimbursable expenses.
Thank you. So I'm going to move that we accept that, and then we'll have a second. And discussion. So are there discussion and questions for Mr. McLeod? Dr. Malik.
Logistically, it's 2 properties. I'm assuming that all of the diligence and zoning and anything that needs to be changed with the city has been done. You said it's 2 distinct parcels of land currently.
Right, and so we're in the process of going through a building lot adjustment, which allows the 2 to be consolidated into 1 property. So we can go ahead and develop it as a single parcel.
And you don't anticipate any issues with that coming?
No, we've already had tacit approval from the city to be able to do that. And we have a survey underway, and that process is with the actual permitting with the land use department at the city right now.
Thank you.
I just had one question. Is there any structure on those 2? You have 2 adjacent parcels. Is there a structure currently on either? Is there a tear down?
Yeah, there are 2 which were originally residential type homes there. One has then been turned into what was a German school at one time. And then the other parcel was next to, it was a architectural business. So yeah, it was turned into more of an office type designation as far as the land use code.
Okay, I think this actually rings a bell from a few years ago, so thank you. Thank you.
Anything else? I'll just make a comment. It's exciting to see this come along from when it was considered and being able to acquire the properties and then to get to this stage and to be able to serve our students this way, to have it in an area where they can access public transportation and all that. And then at the same time, it also will open up possibilities for Interlake High School where that's currently housed. So looking forward to see then what will happen with using that space and being able to serve students in that school community.
Right. Gives us a lot of flexibility for the Interlake campus to be able to reuse that for general ed programs, as well as robotics, which we definitely need up there.
Right, portable village. Okay, anything else?
I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't mention something with sadness, which is there was one special needs family that said that they felt sad that their transitions kid was going to be moved to a separate facility because they wanted them to be more integrated into and included in the Interlake community. So it's a little bit of sadness there, but it's not something we're going to be changing at this late point.
So that's a little bit separate than the actual building, but do we have comment from staff in terms of, I believe there's been a lot of thought in terms of supporting students and that this has kind of a research base and strategy behind this being the way to support these students.
Unconditional. We can go into much more detail, but yes, as both as a quote unquote standalone program, but really, how do we support the young people? And it's just an outstanding program. So it wouldn't take much for us to start answering that question, but the short answer is yes, that has been done.
So Director Watson, I see a lot of head nodding. Would you like to have a brief memo that outlines like the research and the kind of pedagogy and the thought behind why this move supports our students?
No, I just really wanted to, I just felt like that it was incumbent on me to just mention that, because that's, it came to me from one of our biggest advocates for special needs. And she just felt like she had a lot of struggles and her daughter felt marginalized. And, but I don't.
Well, change is challenging, certainly in a time where there's been a lot of change. Dr. Jarvis, if that would be all right, I think it might be useful to have those as talking points and being able to share those with the families that are impacted.
Basically, I'm not sure what it will look like, but we'll bring you a report, yes.
Okay.
I think
and
the
I'll
question
share that
is
with
not necessarily just the research base. I think that it is the idea that it's hard not to other people when we separate them. And the community that has been built up in Interlake in both directions of those students participating in and other students participating with them has impacted both sets of lives and made it a more integrated community. And while there is research that says that during that transitions phase, it's important to increase independence and not necessarily immerse in the high school environment anymore because it is a transition, that there is a desire to still keep a sense of community and to not lose that piece of this. So it might be interesting to know actually what opportunities for community building in both directions that we're creating in the new facility. Not as a tit for tat, but more as like, what is the community building approach so that people can get excited about it?
And I think that would be part of the memo, which is that it's not just a taking away, it's what is being created.
So if we do get such a report, my intent would be then to share that information with special needs PTSA.
You can share widely, sure.
Yeah.
Post here publicly.
Yeah, and I'm not, like, I'm thinking of a variety of ways we can do that, which could well be some face-to-face and conversation about what it means. I do want to, I just double check that we were making a move in this case, if you approve this, to build that on the property that's being designated. And if there's a reservation on that, we would need to know tonight.
Yeah, that's why I was just saying it was just a comment of sadness and not that I'm expecting you to change what you're doing. Yeah.
And Mr. McLeod, what's the anticipated timeline from now until completion?
We're going to start educational specifications with the staff in terms of what are the things that they need to go ahead and physically operate the program. So we'll start that, and we're looking at having the thing permitted and ready to go here, hopefully by midsummer. It's pretty aggressive, but it's a smaller type project, and we've done a lot of work with the city to see that we can pretty well streamline the permitting process with that.
So permitted, and then construction time would be about a year, like our other buildings?
Probably a year for that. One of the things that's a little challenging right now is the supply line, for a lot of the commodities. So that's a thing we work on. But again, once we go ahead, start permitting process, we start early procurement of materials. So that'll give us a pretty good advantage on that. And things are starting to loosen up out there a bit.
Thank you.
So I guess my final word would be, let's not forget a sense of community and belonging for these students.
So what I hear from this is you're not opposed to.
No, I'm not opposed.
You just want to articulate that there's a sense of loss and there's an opportunity to maybe try to create that sense of community, which I think is what Dr. Chu was saying.
Well, I think that these are our students, and goal number one is around
social emotional well-being, and one of our primary goals around that is sense of belonging. And so that holds, continues to hold, and is like number one that's on there, so.
I want to call it, it's in multiple directions. We as a larger community are always at more of a loss when a portion of our community withdraws from interaction with the core community. So while it is sad that those students won't have the opportunity to socialize with the kids up at Interlake, it is also sad that all the kids up at Interlake won't have the opportunity to socialize with those young men and women and to learn from them. And I think that we are working really hard to lose a deficit mindset in our community so that we can really celebrate the true assets that every student brings with them. And I think those students are bringing assets to Interlake. And so when we talk about the community sense, it really should be about how those students get to participate in multiple directions. It's not just people coming in and taking care of them. They're also being a part of our community and taking care of all of us in the different ways that they contribute and interact. So just want to call out, it's really important that when we express things, that we recognize that dual directionality of what everyone has to offer.
So why don't we take a vote on this? So it's been moved and seconded. Is there anything else? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No abstentions. So the proposal is approved. So thank you, Mr. McLeod. And then Dr. Jarvis, so we'll follow up with the memo there, and then potentially also we could make a note, Ms. Gasparich, for how we could either incorporate something about the transitions program in one of our upcoming study sessions, or whether this is a report for this year, or perhaps something in the future, especially around the time of the move.
It has the potential to be a very rich conversation because it has all kinds of elements that aren't confined to just the narrowest of where are the transition young people, and it's a much broader question of how do we engage the community, how does the community serve and welcome all the participants, and in my opinion, it goes beyond. We can use the example of the transition program and that model and talk about the fact that the funding is there right now for other students to be served from 18 to 21 for transition. And it's not just reserved for one group of students based on their disability. And frankly, I guess I'm broadening the conversation, but we have other young people, whether let's take just kids with IEPs in the high school, and some graduate and some don't, and some who graduate aren't ready for what faces them after high school. We could get pretty quickly into a conversation of what could we do with a transition style extension that doesn't depend on 4-year graduation and everybody's out. You're hearing a certain bias of mine, but I'll put it on the table.
Okay, well, thank you. So thank you everyone for engaging at the discussion. I think it gives us although it was a little bit off, it took us in an area that I think will generate some rich discussion for the future. So that brings us to item 8, which is the levy resolutions. Dr. Jarvis, we're having a brief presentation.
Well, Melissa DeVita comes forth. I mentioned it during the superintendent's report. The single greatest issue that people need to understand is the levy expires. So the levy that was approved in 2018 expires. We need to replace that levy. We need to renew it. If you think of it as a subscription, each time we do that, we have to adjust it to what's the enrollment going to be 5 years from now? What are we looking at in terms of our needs and our staffing, and try to guess what's there. And Melissa DeVita has done this multiple times. She's a skilled artist, and I want to give her lots of credit, but she has worked through and has a very strong recommendation to us on not wanting to see the renewal pass without everybody understanding and working hard. So I would ask Melissa to take charge and make her recommendation for resolutions that would put these issues on the ballot in February.
Good evening, board. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I did want to, do you want me to have a mic?
Can you hear?
I think that one's good.
I think the one.
There's no batteries. You'll have to speak loudly.
My voice carries. I've been told that many a time. Thank you for this opportunity. I do want to talk a little bit about both the education operations levy and the capital and tech levy. These are both renewal levies, and we anticipate this not to have a significant impact on homeowners' taxes as we move forward. In fact, we are targeting to keep the total tax rate for all three of our levies, which is our debt service levy, our education operations levy, and our capital tech levy, to the same rate that homeowners will be paying in 2022, which is $2.54 per $1,000 of assessed value. The EP&O levy is used to really support our kids on a day-to-day basis. It's what allows us to have our 7-period day. It allows our students to achieve 28 credits in high school rather than the 24 minimum requirement from the state. So it gives our students opportunities to explore other areas. And frankly, it gives some students an opportunity to stumble a little bit and still be able to graduate with their classmates. It also pays for $30 million in special education spending that is not funded by the state that we need to meet the needs of our students. And it funds staff that is not funded by the state. In particular, the state only funds 3 nurses for our district, 3.1 FTE nurses, and we have 23 nurses on staff. And in the last year and a half, how important having nurses and medical personnel on staff to support us during the pandemic has been. In addition, the state class sizes under the state allocations are significantly larger. They provide us 1 FTE for 28.5 students at the middle school, and we staff 1 FTE at 22.5 students. At high schools, that difference is 28.7 versus 23. And so it allows us then to have smaller class sizes than we would without renewal of this levy. And so this levy is so important to what our kids can accomplish and will accomplish. And so renewing it is truly in the best interest of our community and our students. Our capital and tech levy, supports new technologies. It allows us to have devices for our students. And when the pandemic did happen and we needed to transition to virtual, we were able to do that within a week, less than a week. In fact, I think all of our students had devices within 3 days. That is not true around the state nor around the country. And the capital and tech levy is what allows us to do that. It allows us to have integrated digital curriculums, and it allows us to have the technology available in our classrooms to support our students as they look at where they're going beyond graduation. And it ensures that they're ready for the world that they're going to be entering. So the last thing that the capital and tech levy does is it really helps us maintain our buildings. Our oldest new buildings are approaching 20 years of age. And so they need things like new carpet, new paint, new roofs, upgraded HVAC systems, and those types of things. And so it's important that we spend the money to maintain these assets so that they can continue to serve our students in our community, because these truly are assets of our community. With respect to the tax rate, renewing the EP&O levy will cost a homeowner of $1 million home $750 a year, and renewing the capital and tech levy will cost $1 million homeowner $590 a year, for a total of $1,340 per year. Yes.
And that is comparable to what they would currently be paying, correct?
Currently be paying in total. So the the debt service fund varies year to year, and so we're making sure that the total local tax package remains the same.
Meaning to the homes that you just described, in total, this would not impact it. Dr. Jarvis's point, this would be a renewal
Correct.
of the same payment they've been making.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep. And so I ask you tonight to please approve these resolutions so that we can be on the ballot in February of 2022 to ask our community to renew these levies. Our current levies do expire at the end of 2022. And so these would allow us to continue to collect those local taxes moving into 2023 and to keep consistency in the educational programs and facilities and technologies that we offer to our students.
Thank you. Are there questions?
I just had one, on the capital and tech levy. I was asked by somebody, and I didn't know the answer on whether that includes some of the equipment that's relevant for CTE.
It does include some of the equipment that's relevant to CTE, but CTE is also funded separately by the state. And so it really comes from both of those different buckets depending.
But the answer would be yes.
Yes.
Not entirely, but it does contribute.
Correct.
Okay, they were particularly impressed with our CTE program and asked if that levy was relevant to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I took a guess, but I said I would confirm.
Yes.
So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have, usually we move and second it and then have the discussion, but since there's two levies, we'll take discussion first on both of them, and then we'll move and vote on each one separately. Is there further comments?
Yeah, I just have a question, comment about these. I think one of the things I'd say to what Director Serafin was just talking about is there's almost nothing in our district that isn't impacted by our levies. Like the generosity of our community has been paramount to us being able to provide the kind of educational opportunities that we do here. And even when we struggle, we're still providing more and richer opportunities than you get almost anywhere else. But even without that, even the bare basics, we did not get enough funds from the federal government to cover our costs from COVID. Without our levies and our community support, we couldn't have done this.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, the technology, like the fact that that's not considered part of basic ed at this point is ridiculous. We know that we can't prepare our kids for the current world without that technology. So I really deeply, deeply appreciate the work that you do to make this accessible to our community and meaningful to our schools. My one question for you is just, I asked you sort of this a little bit offline, and I just wanted to get clarity for everyone. How did we make sure that we thought about the equity implications of this to our community and to our students in terms of being accessible and being fair and being good?
So you know that the tax structure in Washington State is anything but equitable. And it's very regressive, the most regressive across the 50 states. And so we, as a district, though, are limited in terms of what we can do within that structure. That being said, equity comes into the picture in terms of how we spend our dollars, not necessarily where we get our funding from. And so we do look at need and put the most dollars to the greatest needs.
Thank you. And we're also, like you said, I think it matters that we're going way out of our way to make sure we are not asking for huge increases, that this is a renewal of existing donation level from our community, and we.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing I'd like to add is that school districts, unlike many of our taxing authorities within the state of Washington, ask voters to approve an amount that we can collect. We don't always collect that entire amount because we are limited by the state legislature on how much we can collect in local levies. On top of it, if assessed values go up significantly, we are still only collecting that amount. And so the tax rates will drop beyond what our expectations. So we put out there, here's what we expect you to pay. They could be lower. And in the past, two elections, they have been lower in reality than what we put on the ballot because assessed values have gone up faster for the total of the district than we had anticipated. So we try and be conservative so that homeowners will not have a higher rate than we anticipated, but most of the time they even have a lower tax rate because of that.
Anything else, Director Watson?
Yeah, I was wondering about the explanatory statements. Do those go in the voters pamphlet, or where are those used that are here?
They will go in the voters
Yeah.
pamphlet. There's also ballot language that's in there.
Are they, is the format of that dictated, you know, that you have to do a certain way?
Yes.
Okay, because I was just looking at it and I'd say, I would not lead with so many millions. You have, it's gonna be so many millions, it pays for this great stuff, and it's only pennies on the,
Yes.
on the assessed value. And I would have done it the other way. Pennies on the assessed value, great stuff, millions.
Yeah, it's not, we don't have a choice in that.
All right.
I agree.
I wish we could.
Yeah, I think that overall, it's certainly going to come down in the other messaging. A lot of the things that you said in the preamble here as to what it funds, like what percentage of our budget. So if this went away, how that would impact us.
20% of our general fund expenditures.
Right. So having that messaging will need to be crisp and really made to our community, because reading this is it's not ideal.
And I just want to make an unsolicited sort of point that this levy, these levies, the ask for the renewal is not because we, and I really mean Christine, Dr. Chu, is not actively trying at every turn to get the kind of funding we should be getting generally, but we are not getting what we should, and these levies have, to your point, they have been what's made us distinct as a district. So, but now we really need this renewed. So thank you.
I motion that we approve, you wanted to do them one at a time? The first, the education and operations levy as presented.
I will second that. Dr. Jarvis, you were about to make a comment.
Just that the resolutions that are in front of you have been drafted by the attorney. You met Cynthia Weed during the sale of the bonds. And she is also the one who has drafted the language and to be fully compliant.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of item 8.1, the EP&O levy?
Aye.
All right, so that's 5 ayes for that one. And then I'm going to move that we approve the capital tech levy.
Second.
Any further discussion? No, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's 5 ayes, so that one passes as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for all of the work that's involved in there. And then I will say that as part of our FinOps committee, Director Watson has volunteered to be the liaison. However, we can certainly have another liaison if there's someone else who would like to be the liaison to the external committee that will be involved in promoting passage of these levies.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
know that takes up a lot of time. Thanks, Caroline.
Great job.
And I would also just like to acknowledge Rainika Ghetto and Melissa Richardson have both volunteered to be the co-chairs of the Citizens Committee supporting this effort. And I really appreciate their willingness to put in that time and energy to help us get these. So.
We appreciate that as well, especially since she just finished doing the bond.
Yeah.
So thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, that brings us to item 9, redistricting director districts. And I think
Shannon is here.
And then did you want to stay on?
Yeah, I was going to stay here.
All right.
Well, I'll grab another chair.
Just turn it over to them.
Our demographer is coming to the chair. Every 10 years, there is a U.S. Census. The law requires that we examine any of the institutions such as school districts and director districts to make sure that we haven't outgrown some and shrinking in others, and make the necessary adjustments. So following the receipt of the numbers, we then engage somebody who knows what they're doing, in this case our demographer, to rejoin us and suggest the what are the needs and what's the solution to our director districts for the Bellevue School District.
So I'll just jump in and say that, so we have a process where this goes and has a public hearing portion. I wanted to have an opportunity to discuss this first, see if there was any questions or tweaks to it. There is a little bit of concern that we're going to double check on which base map we're using, because the base map on our website and some of the descriptive language are not the same. However, the proposed one is accurate, but we would need to adjust that. So for example, in my District 5, I believe that Eastgate Elementary is included in there, but in this supposedly current map, it's not included. So there's some there, but the proposal is right. And then what's also before you, directors, is that not only are we required at this time, because of the census, to look at our maps, it's not the only time that we necessarily need to do it, but I really wanted to take this time to have the discussion because I believe that it's an opportunity to really examine, are the director districts equitable? Are they achieving aims of ensuring representation throughout our entire district and communities? What information is possible to get from census or other that would assist us in determining whether there is that possibility? Do we need to find other sources of information? So I'm just going to turn that over, but I wanted to set the context and framework that rather than just saying we're going to tweak them so that we match the numbers, it really is an opportunity for us to say, within matching the numbers, do we even need to look at this existing framework and see if perhaps there needs to be something entirely different so we actually achieve the aims that we're trying to, that we espouse.
Timing? You set the framework, but I didn't understand what's the timing.
So we need to have something passed in December.
By December 15th, we need to have something passed.
Right.
However, that does not mean it needs to be something that stands for the next 10 years. So there, we'll go over some of the possibilities, and then I can insert some other background information. But you had a
just a clarification.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you said that the new stuff is correct and the old stuff is we're not sure, what you're saying is the stuff that's pink and yellow and blue and green and gray is as intended.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and the red lines might be off, but we'll fix them.
Well, can I just say, the red lines that you're looking at came from King County Elections Office, and they are different from what's on our website, and what's on our website is two different versions. We have one that is under Become a Director and another that's under Meet the Directors. So because this came from King County Elections Office, I believe it is the correct map. We will confirm that with King County Elections Office, but that was the source.
Thank you. So we'll confirm.
And I can elaborate. So we include Medina, Clyde Hill, part of Redmond. So the city of Bellevue doesn't really provide us with GIS data. So our only source for GIS data is King County. So we wanted to get a digital map of districts, and so that's why we consulted King County Elections in August of 2019. So that was when I was provided with that map. So when districts become 10 years old, a lot of times kind of the mapping becomes questionable, and our district boundary is kind of one way or another depending upon maps that you see from various sources. So we have an opportunity here with the brand spanking new census data to have absolutely correct director district boundaries. And I will take this opportunity to make sure we have an absolutely correct district boundary shown in all of our locations that serve data. And there's a couple of places, I think the Dinsmore neighborhood down in the southern part of the district, depending upon which map you look at, it's in Bellevue or Renton. So we have an opportunity to clean that up on all of our websites, make sure that we have the most accurate, most up-to-date data available. And then I'll communicate with my sources in at the elections department in King County and make sure they have the most accurate stuff if you decide to go forward with what you're looking at tonight.
Yeah, is that little green line there at the very south part of District 5?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, because it seemed, I have some vague memory of a couple of years ago, some people down there petitioning to become part of Bellevue, but we declined. So I don't know if
That's the one
That's
that,
when we accepted it.
Oh, we did
that's the one
accept?
that was
Oh,
accepted.
we did? Oh, okay.
There was another group that we declined.
Right, okay, so is that green line then?
No, the group that we declined was along Lake Sammamish, Lake Washington.
Yeah.
But
I was just wondering if that accepting and declining things is what resulted in that green line
yes,
there.
yeah.
Okay.
Just for the humor of it, Melissa looked at me as she said that because I was in Renton at the time, negotiating with Bellevue.
I actually went down and looked at those 12 lots that you're referring to, and according to the county assessor, they're Bellevue 405 lots.
Wow.
Okay. So the county has them as ours.
Mhm.
If you'd like me to talk a little bit about the situation recommendation, I can just very briefly do that. I attempted to do as simplistic of an analysis as I possibly can. Statute indicates that you have all sorts of options, but the districts need to be about the same size. And I use a 3% deviation. I've probably done about 150 of these nationally. And I kind of have this 3% number, and I've been used by as an expert witness by various federal courts, and they've kind of written this 3% into the statute. So our existing districts are off anywhere from 5 to about 19%. So because we've grown so much and they have been around for 10 or 11 years, that's to be expected. So districts 1 and districts 3 are a little bit bigger than they should be, and districts 2, 4, and 5 are smaller than they should be. So the census released what's called PL94 data, which is the reapportionment data that everybody in the United States uses for congressional districts. It's the gold standard of reapportionment data. And they provided that to us in August, 2 months ahead of when they said they were going to provide it. So it's kind of this gift that fell from the sky. So it's all broken up into little 3-block size areas. So you have a lot of puzzle pieces to move around if you want to. In addition to giving a total count of how many people live in those zones, it's also stratified by the age of the residents and by their racial makeup. So there are those 2 additional data pieces in the PL 94-171 data that are available via these little tiny units of geography. And I will tell you, there are about 100,000 of those little building blocks in Bellevue. So you can do a very fine-grained analysis if you want to. So when I saw that we were off, we had a total district size of 148,821. Now again, that includes Bellevue, Redmond, Medina, Clyde Hill, and some other little fringe areas. So that includes everybody, okay? So that's the population of the district. An average district should be about 29,764. And on page 2 of your analysis, I moved the boundaries around. I made 1 and 3 smaller and 2, 4, and 5 larger, and got us to within 0.5% of deviation. Now, again, I'm creating square boxes that more or less comply with your historic pattern of representation, meaning the districts kind of look like they've always looked before, meaning they're mostly square boxes, but now they're legal, okay? So that's fundamentally what I did to get to the population that you see there. And the shaded area on your map represents the boundaries that would coincide with this numeric analysis that is in your report that shows the districts getting to within 0.5% of each other. Now, I do not split any lots. So in addition to getting the census block data, I look at King County's assessment record and make sure I don't have any residential lots that are cut in half, so that I have to say, okay, the master bedroom's on this side of the parcel or the line, so that person is in that district. No, I made it coincide with all of the district parcels so it would be super clean. And then I can give Melissa or Yasmina a list of all the districts that are in, all the addresses that are in District 1, all the addresses that are in District 2, etc. And we can look those up on a table based on that kind of a reapportionment. So that was my process. That was what I did. I'd be delighted to respond to any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions? Dr. Chu?
Sure.
So when you did this, clearly you were very thoughtful about making sure that it made sense, it was proportionate and all that sort of stuff, and it kind of stayed within what folks were sort of used to in the district, so it wasn't like some major redraw of everything.
That's correct.
In what way did you consider whether or not this is creating the most equitable representation from our across our school district, and how do people do that in an effective, fair, and meaningful ways?
I did not explore that. I was functioning as kind of an impartial accountant, and was basically trying to draw 5 square boxes that had the same number of people in them, where you could describe over the telephone what the boundaries of your district are to a certain extent. So I tried to simplify everything so that it would be more straightforward and it wouldn't be confusing when we map it and serve it on our website. Regarding any sort of a socioeconomic status analysis, those sorts of analyses are possible with the data and with an impartial person doing the work. I don't have any kind of skin in the game, so to speak. I have a place in Ferndale and a place in Boulder, Colorado. I don't live here. So I'm objectively looking at these neighborhoods, and if you wanted me to balance them via socioeconomics, I can do that with the data that's available, but I don't think there's any economic data in the PL 94 data. There is just age stratification and race stratification. I can double check that if you like. There are other sources for income specific data, but the census kind of put all of its eggs in one basket to put PL 94 out quickly because everybody was clamoring for it to do reapportionment work, and everything else got put on hold. So the other data that I was looking for other data today, I was trying to figure out the current 2020 populations of 7 resort towns in a little mountain district, and the census hasn't published it yet. In fact, they've pulled down some of the historic data that used to be up for 2019. So I think they put all their effort into the PL 94 data. I'm hoping that later in the fall, they'll put out economic data, meaning medium income, poverty data, some of the other indicators you would use if you were doing a socioeconomic specific analysis. But right now, what I'm sure of is that the age and the race data is there. I just don't know about the income data.
Do you know if you had that age and race data, if you used it, like if you just checked it, would we have changed dramatically percentage-wise in either of those categories in the way the districts are drawn?
It depends. In Bellevue, race and income are kind of different. There are not a lot of direct correlations between race data and income data in certain circumstances, but between District 1 and District 2 and District 5, if we were to inject the element of trying to have a Caucasian, non-Caucasian percentage balancing effort, those 3 districts would kind of throw the analysis off a little bit, and I would need to do something of a little bit more of a star pattern as opposed to a pizza slice pattern, if you will. Imagine a pizza sliced into 5 slices instead of trying to keep the 5 square boxes that you've had for the last 25 years. So that sort of an analysis might yield the kind of racial and somewhat economic balance that you might be looking for. But I would say that there is a concentration of lower income people in the eastern end of the Bell Red, and in order to distribute those folks into more of an equitable distribution, I would want to slice that area up into maybe 3 pieces so that it would be included in 3 different districts. There are other parts of town that I would want to explore the 156th Street corridor. It's also an area where there's a lot of diversity, and dividing that area up among multiple districts might facilitate more equitable districts if that's what you were looking for.
So what I'm gonna put forward is that, so we do have some time crunch in terms of having a map that goes forward. But I do wanna put out that currently, and including the candidates, you looked at that, they would not be affected. And once they're elected, they continue regardless of its change. So one possibility is to go forward with this map, but then take time to do a more in-depth analysis, perhaps garner community input, and then revisit this almost a year from now, or 9 months from now, something like that. It's still within the same cycle. There'll be, the new board will have met the requirements, and then, but have a more in-depth discussion about what it means to have potentially equitable director districts. Director Malay.
The only other thing I would throw in for consideration is school attendance boundaries and the individual neighborhoods. Like, I'm just looking at like this little corner of Woodridge that got split, and then this neighborhood in like South Sammamish. You know, it just sort of feels a little odd to split those up, but I understand the point in trying to, divvy up, rational or by population, but I would consider school attendance areas and like sort of traditional neighborhood boundaries as well.
I don't know if that makes any difference to their lives.
Yeah, I don't know how it does for the high, are you saying it makes a difference for what high school you attend?
No, I mean, it's for, who can run from each area, right? And so.
Yeah.
So part of what happens is that you can, because of, and it could happen with any of the adjacent director districts, but you can more likely end up with directors whose neighborhoods, either their students or who they see, are in the same feeder pattern, and then another feeder pattern that has, might feel like they don't have this representation because of the way the lines are drawn.
Thank you. We articulate that way better than all of us.
What is the ask at this point?
So so one is to gather input and assess the sentiment of directors. I'll say that even before I was on the board, I had looked at this and thought that perhaps there was another way of doing it so that we're, what the representation is, because ultimately all voters vote, and yet you have to come from a certain area. So there are other districts where they have 3 districts and 2 at large. You have to have at least 3 districts and 2 at large, or 4 and an at-large member. And so that allows someone who's interested and qualified wherever they reside to be able to participate in the districts. And sometimes that's by virtue of geography. Dr. Jarvis has served in a district where that was needed because of the way the geography divided. Sometimes it's districts that have a very urban core and a lot of rural population. So it really is dependent on the district and what they need. But it's to say that there are lots of options. It's not just let's take what we've done historically and tweak it. So as we have these discussions about our system in general and things that are baked in structurally that may not be best in service or aligned with our values, it's an opportunity to examine that. And so that's what we're doing with this. And so gathering input, and then we could either, if there was a big, push for change and we wanted to happen soon, we could try. But it does seem from the information that I've gathered that in order to do a thoughtful process, if we're going to at least try to put other proposals on, it would take some time. And so really the intermediate step would be to put forward the historical proposal, which is historical with some modifications, but then commit to a more in-depth process and have an ongoing discussion about that, and then revisit it at
some future time. I don't think we'd specify at this time, but it might take until, the summer to be able to gather that data and that input.
So 5 years ago, the question was asked as to whether or not a redistricting thing could be investigated. And the answer came back, no, it can only be done when the census is done. So I'm curious that you got a different answer, and I'm wondering what changed. And I want to make sure that if we make that if we make the choice to pursue that, I'd like to have some sort of like real backup on that, because literally that was nixed a while back.
So Dr. Travis, could we have that question posed to council and confirm?
We definitely will get you we'll both with the back firm and attorney and get you a specific answer.
So I just want to share one little piece with Shannon. There was a AP Human Geography class that looked at Bellevue and its socioeconomic distribution, and it's project-based kids doing a thing, and their conclusion, the teacher told me, was that Bellevue is a donut hole, which is probably not a surprise to you, that the wealthier families live along the coasts of both lakes, and then the places in the middle are lower socioeconomic status. So you have a little bit of coast in each of the districts, but I see, District 2 is lacking a bit.
Yeah, you're making me hungry, but the intersection there is where the 4 districts meet.
Yeah.
Is kind of close to the focus of diversity, economic and otherwise, in the district.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what I would kind of refer to as a star pattern. But again, I'm so used to trying to deliver metrics that are more exact instead of rough.
Mm-hmm.
That when you say you would want a diversity equalization, I would be looking at trying to get things very close instead of roughly close. But the way that the 4 districts come together, not counting District 5, they do intersect more or less in an area of high economic need. I just checked PL 94 and there's no economic data in there. There's age and race stratification, and that's it. So we would be waiting until later in the fall or early spring when the census decides to release economic data for small study areas in order to have something. I turn things around as quickly as I can for the district, but I would be waiting on them to deliver that, and right now it's not available.
I also would like to say that the law does require us to do community input process. And if we make significant changes, I would like that process to be planned out and include a very broad audience, especially if we're making significant changes from where we are right now. And I don't think that we can do that between now and December 15th with any sense of fidelity. And so I just put that out there because I think it's really important that if we're going to even contemplate making changes, because there's a lot right now about changing boundaries of voting districts, whether it be for state representation, congressional representation. And so really, really important that we understand what our objectives are and go from and map out how what we're proposing meets those objectives and really get quite a bit of valid input from that perspective. So that would be my one piece of.
So do we need to get that legal clarity before we can vote on this?
Well, we are on a tight timeline.
Yeah.
So it is possible that we get the verdict back that says, no, you can't. You either do it now or you wait another 10 years. And so if that were the case, would that change what directors would want to do within the short time frame that we have? And understanding that I did raise this earlier, but we didn't have the data, and we still don't have the data that we really need, which has confounded this process. So you need to consider whether that would change what you would want to do. But in the meantime, otherwise, I would propose that we go forward with this with the commitment to engage in a process that would collect various types of data. So quantitative data as well as qualitative data and input
from board directors as well as our community to determine what it is we are looking for in director districts and the representation.
The issue though is that even if we learn that it's now or not at all, based on what Melissa's just outlined, as well as
Mr. Bingham.
Mr. Bingham, thank you, presented, we don't have the data or the community input to be able to get things done in less than 2 months and do it. I think that's one person put to the fidelity we want. So we might actually make things worse or think we're improving. So I'm inclined to say that your proposal makes sense to me, which is, it sounds like vote now, make a commitment to keep working. If we learn that we can do more, we would then engage in a goal-bound sort of effort to get input, probably after we finish with other things such as the levy, but we would have it obviously tracked and.
How many votes do we have to take on this? Because we have to do a public input section.
Right.
Is that before or after we take a vote?
So you do not need to vote right now. My question for you is this what you want to go forward with our public input sessions and things, right? So
it's kind of an informal.
It's an informal, not a formal resolution. And so we will have to, our plan is to put it up on the website to publicly announce that it's there so that people can provide comment. We also have to have a public hearing, so we will advertise that public hearing. The public hearing has to be at least 10 days before you do your final voting. So I propose that we do the public hearing at the next board meeting. And then at the subsequent board meeting, we actually have the vote on finalizing this so that we can submit it before December 15th.
Is it possible for us to get some high-level summative analysis or summative summary of data that tells the two axes of data we do have the ability to look at, not to redo the districts in any way, but to just say, here's the percentage makeup in each of the districts for those two categories as it currently stands, and here's what it will be when we change. I would just like to know that. I don't want to like use that data inappropriately. I would just like to understand where this puts us. Is that appropriate? Is that acceptable to look at or not?
In the fresh data, there is the age data and the race data. And in estimates, and this is one thing that kind of qualifies your question, I work with another company that provides mid-decade estimates of population, and I use that for reapportionment. And there's also the American Community Surveys providing median income data that's out there as well. So we could probably get 2018 income data by block group or something to that effect, and we could show some estimates, but it's not going to be this most recent, most legally solid reapportionment data that we're trying to use for this reapportionment.
I totally get that. So I'm asking if the two pieces of data that you do have,
sure,
you could report on it per area.
Absolutely.
So the other part of that is whether the board is able to make a change after this or not, where we're going to get the decision. I would urge the board to go through the process anyway, because I think the information is useful and then can be used by the board and the district. So even if it's not in the boundaries now, it sets up the information for the future. But in the meantime, it might influence representation on advisory committees, for example, or either for the superintendent or for the board. And so I think the discussion and the process is useful. Hopefully it could be used in this process subsequently, but if it can't, I still think it has value.
You're talking about getting the data that I'm asking for.
The data that you're asking for, but the whole process that we talked about, right? Which might, take through the summer or into next year. Like, especially if it is like, well, you can't actually change it. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it because it still adds value and it allows us to take that into account in decision making or composition of advisory committees, et cetera. Okay, so gonna just kind of look here informally to say this would be the proposal that we would put forward for the upcoming hearing.
I don't think we have any other choice.
Well, we could say we would like you to draw a different one.
But it's good.
Right, right, it's good, but it sounds like to do that well,
I would move
this is what we do.
towards the existing.
Okay, so we're going to do that. And in the meantime, aside from Dr. Chu's ask, is there any other ask people in the short term? And is there a general consensus that this would be something that the board will look at sometime in the future, perhaps in the spring, when more data is available, and that could be structured
I don't
to
really
get
think
input?
that's something, I mean, we don't have a new board yet, so.
Well, we can, just like we just approved the calendar for the year, that's something that I will just then ask to be put on the calendar. So of course we can do that as this board. We just put it on the calendar for the spring.
I think what I would do with that piece, if I may, is to suggest that Melissa's about to initiate a thoughtful community engagement process around this proposal. And we're gonna have data available to have interesting discussions at that time. And so when she comes back, if it seems like that would help inform us, I think, like the data itself will inform us, the community inputs will inform us, like about what might be next. And so when we have the proposal that we're voting on, at that time, it might be a perfect time for us to just say, hey, let's add a work item to our calendar for March or whatever, and we can do that.
Okay, so why don't we for now just put it on that running list so we remember to bring it back up again at the appropriate time. And I think we're set. You have the input, yes?
So otherwise, we'll see this at the first November meeting or second?
You will see it both, because the first one will be the public hearing, and then the second one will be the actual resolution and vote.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we are a little behind, but we'll catch up here. Our next item is committee work. The first one is listed as goal comps that you, Dr. Jen?
I think we'll tag team this one. The goal comp piece, what we're trying to do is, the whole group of us has said, this committee work seems to be a little bit out of whack. It doesn't seem to scale to what we can maintain as individual board members nor as staff. And so we wanna sort of revisit that. And so there are different ways that we could organize things. Instead of having committee plans, we could do something like have a board plan for the year, and then different people can sign up to take on different work items, like an individual or a couple of people could sign up to take on things, and then they would become sort of, I guess, an informal committee or whatever for that action item. But there are many ways that we could do it. We moved to the committee structure because we weren't distributing the policy work across the board, and only like 1 or 2 board members were really touching policy, and that's the bulk of our work, and that seemed broken. So that was an attempt to kind of move us in the right direction and also capture some of the other oversight and advocacy work that we do. But I think it has taken on a life of its own. So what we wanted to do tonight is just get everyone to say, what are the things that I value about this work? What are the things that I would do, that I don't value? And is the board structure, is the committee structure the right way to approach it? And if the committee structure is good, what would you change about it to make it better? And we were asked to come up with some questions. So we've got 9, but they really overlap quite a bit. If you read them carefully, there's a good amount of overlap. And I think we were asked to just introduce them tonight so that you guys could think about them. And then if you could send responses to us. I didn't know if you were using it to plan the retreat. If it's just to us, that's fine. Send it to Tish, and we'll figure out how to use that and be fully compliant with OPMA.
So the retreat, you mean this?
Yeah, I thought there was like the mail that I got said something like we needed it for that.
The executive committee wants you to develop questions about committees and the utility or lack of them for the executive committee to consider. So I had the impression, and I may have misunderstood, that we were getting these questions together for the executive committee to consider.
Yeah, that's what I had the impression too. So it's fine for us to take it on because it's on our work list.
We're happy to, I can do it. I'm not sure,
Well,
I didn't initiate that.
Well, not only if it's gonna be for the for the retreat,
This
because otherwise.
wasn't, this wasn't generated basically as.
Which retreat? You mean next?
Yeah, that's what was
26th, the
implied.
workshop?
That's what was implied, so.
These set of questions were not generated by our committee in sort of our regular course. We understood it was a deliverable for today. You wanted us, the executive committee, to put together questions, talked about committee work. For that reason, we put them together in the interest of time. As Christine said, she kind of did the first, she submitted some, I submitted some. They're different, but there's definitely some parallel.
Why don't we have directors submit responses to Ms. Gaspridge, CC Mr. Harrison, and they can compile them, and then we can determine the best course, because initially this had at the top, when I reviewed it, it said for the November 4th meeting.
Well, don't worry about it. So I think that the bottom line
is. It still says for
is,
discussion at the November 4th.
it doesn't sound like you need it in time for this retreat next week. You need it for November. And it's fine for these to come back to Goalcom. It is on our, like 1200 or 1240 and 1240p are on our top list, our short list of things to do. So we're happy to do the work, but we're also happy to do it with the full board in a workshop setting, which might be terrific. But
I think the full board in a workshop makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But I would just say, for those who are going to complete this, questions 4 and 9 are quite a bit the same. But I would say, you know, Christine and I did these separately, and I thought that was actually kind of good because we kind of each came at it slightly differently. The last 4 questions are my questions, and I kind of was entertaining our committees even needed. Is there, and I think Christine does raise that question in number 4. How would you do it if not a committee? But I sort of saw it a little more as kind of operating within the bounds of the committee's work. How can we improve them? And I'm not saying we should dismantle. I was just sort of kind of kicking the tires on, do we really want to?
So why don't we just have directors, please submit your responses to Ms. Gaspridge and Mr. Harrison by noon on Monday. Okay. And that way, if we want to incorporate them into the workshop time, we'll be able to, because there will be some overlap. And then at that point, we can determine if it's discussed in the workshop or at a future meeting.
you know, it would be great if they could be just, like the compilation of them could be attached to that meeting.
Right.
So that then becomes shared public knowledge, and then it can go back to any committee to work on at that point. And it's not like if you saw it and helped with it, it doesn't preclude us from doing
that. So that will be the plan. So until noon on Monday, the 25th.
And if for some reason people don't get all their input in by that time, like that's a very short turnaround that we're asking people for. So if it doesn't work out, just add to it and we'll submit it at another meeting. But if you can do it, that'd be great, because then it can get used at the meeting.
Please send us a reminder tomorrow. Okay, and then did you want to talk further about the legislative priorities for Goalcom here?
This is really just an opportunity. We talked about those at the last meeting. This is just an opportunity if people had a chance to review them, to come back and ask us questions or give input on any of the positions. There's no agenda here for us to give you more information than you were given at the last meeting.
Thank you both for serving. I know the handbook is lengthy, and we've been listening to comments on it in the WASDA chatter. So I think we're set from what we've discussed and voted on before with our priorities. Is there any other input?
No, but we're behind on schedule, so I think we should.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Anything from Scythe?
Well, we all had those listening sessions, and I feel like we need more time than like 5 minutes to kind of share that out. So I don't know if there's time to allot like a 20 minute to a half hour discussion at a future board meeting in the next couple of sessions. Yeah. In which case we could just move on, because I don't think we're going to get. We actually have a hard stop today with the, ribbon cutting. So I don't think that today is a good time to actually go through it.
Okay. So what we'll do in the discussion will be to discuss, so not to recap. what happened at the listening session. So some notes from each one should be available again, Ms. Gasbridge and Mr. Harrison. And if you're missing notes from any of them, please ping the directors who are at the particular meeting to ensure that you're getting notes. And then again, we'll compile them and then have a general discussion. So because fortunately, we did a lot of outreach to our community. And so it would be more productive to have a discussion rather than rehashing each one.
So there will be notes that Tish is leading the charge on getting together.
Yeah.
But they're not going to be comprehensive, perfect detail, like she's going to summarize things and.
We were
they're gonna
at the
process
meeting,
it.
so, you know.
Yeah.
Just the note says you wrote them down is fine, we can sort it out.
Yeah, we'll just trust that because they'll be posted publicly, that people can see them, that it is caveated that it is, they are notes. And really it's the discussion and how we're incorporating that information. That is the key.
I think if they are put in publicly, I just want to make sure that we're mindful of community privacy. Yeah, it's true, because some parents in that environment, if you have their name and then they say my
No.
kid.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to make sure, because many parents will talk about their kid being on IEP or class.
This is themes and they're not
Themes.
even specific to one
Well, I think
session,
it's
they're
just to
across
make sure
sessions.
that we're all on the same
Yeah,
page.
we'll take a look at it before it's posted for executive committee. Okay, so thank you for all the work that's being done on committees, board business. Any board updates? I think we had been doing written reports. I think we need to go back to doing that, but I know there might be some updates.
Just throw out, Jubilee Reach has been doing a lot with sports again this season, which is awesome for everybody, except they like everyone else are very stretched on staff. And so they would love it if some parents could volunteer to support the sport coaching, whatever, chaperoning sort of thing, so that their staff can get a little bit of a break because they're exhausted.
Anything else?
Valley Schools Foundation's director is back and she's had a baby and she's back at work and they are really gearing up for their Clickathon. So their Clickathon is one of the 2 major fundraisers and it really helps us out. So get the word out if you hear it from people, encourage them to contribute if they're able and willing because they really are working hard to support every child every day. And they were going through what the district had spent, and while there are a couple of places where we didn't fully quite spend yet, like the use that we are making of their dollars is impressive in terms of the impact on socioeconomic, socio-emotional needs of our students in particular.
When is the Clickathon?
I do not know the exact dates. It's supposed to be, I thought it was supposed to be this month, but they might have pushed it out to next.
Will they have points that they can send to like the PTAs?
They usually do, and I think that they're just a couple weeks behind. There was a reason, I forget what the reason was, but they're a couple weeks behind.
I don't have an update on PTA because I was gone the last 2 weeks, and I think there's a relevant meeting going on, so I will defer to that one.
Yeah, I was there and I sort of pinch hit it, and I got up and told them a few interesting things, and I think I already mentioned this. And yeah, I divided it a little bit from, these are the things superintendents will do that you're asking about, and these are things board, trying to re-emphasize that. And I've also been arranged some, I'll be attending special needs as usual and so forth. They have a meeting coming up. It's going to be online, which is easier for special needs families,
So again, in the discussion session, we should highlight things that are urgent or time sensitive, and then put the rest into writing for the liaison reports. And I'm going to remind everyone to make sure that your liaison section is up to date, because that way people can look at it. So at the next meeting, we will discuss interest in officer roles and potentially liaisons if we have time for that. So you may want to peruse the list of liaisons, and then at whatever we don't get to at the first meeting, we'll do in this second meeting. So in preparation for that first business meeting. The other reminders are vote for your WASDA vice president.
have something here about, if you have information that you want to ensure is part of the onboarding materials for new directors, please let me know as soon as possible so we can get that finalized for them and provide a workshop. There was a section on board docs. I'm not sure why it was taken down. So they need to be re-uploaded, and so we want to get those up soon.
Okay, and then when they're up there, we can take a look.
Well, just send me a list of what you think should be included, and then.
Oh, I was like, I wouldn't know what to
Make
add
sure.
unless I can see what's
Just-
already there.
Yeah. If there's things, but we can do it that way as well. All right, any other announcements? I have something here that says attendance, I'll think about what that means. Okay, so moving on then to item 12, unless there's anything else for agenda planning? No? Okay. Item 12, superintendent search update. So we had quite a lengthy discussion last time, so I don't want to rehash everything. However, we did indicate that we would put this back on the agenda so that all directors were present for the information. And so I'll just highlight that on July 1st, 2022, we need a superintendent, so we need to make some decision regarding that. Per RCW 28A.400.100, I quote, "The board of directors shall elect a superintendent who shall have such qualifications as the school board alone shall determine." However, in line with our district values, this board really is committed to listening to students, families, educators, staff, and our community partners, and certainly we have demonstrated that in our listening sessions, in our availability, in outreach, not just asking people to come to us, but making sure that we're going out and being broadly available. And so there are a number of points that we discussed last time, but also the main one is that while historically, at times, many times, we've done a big national search, and even I was under the impression that that means that in a national search where you're looking for external candidates, those are weighed against internal candidates. Historically, and in many districts, that does not happen. So if you have strong internal candidates, they are considered, and if you feel like there isn't someone internally, then outside external search is conducted. And so to really highlight that the decision-making process, one doesn't mean it's superior to another. It's taking into account the needs, the availability, the strengths, the resources, really what our district needs at the time and what we have available, and then making a decision from there. So that, I think, summarizes, there were a lot of great points that were made. Is there anything else you want to highlight?
I think the biggest highlight is that Francine and I.
Listen to the last conversation.
Okay.
Well, and Francine and I went and did the due diligence on creating a RFP that could be sent out. But in the exercise of doing the due diligence on that, like understanding, really internalizing how it would tap our staff and how it would tap our community at a time when we need all hands on deck to getting back to learning and back to being in person and all of those things. It is just not, it doesn't make sense to try to do some large national search this year right away. In addition to that, if we want the opportunity to consider internal candidates, then that also we would want time and space to be able to do that with our community's input and with that process. And so the recommendation that was made, and I think that folks were acceding to at the time, but we really wanted to make sure that 5 people were on board with it, was that we should not do a national search this year. We have great internal talent here. We've got a great interim. We have great other internal talent. We have other options. We've got a community to listen to, but more importantly, we have a whole community to take care of right now. And our focus needs to be on getting everyone back to high quality schooling, and that is where we need to be. So we didn't formalize that in any way, but effectively by not taking action today, if we do not put out an RFP today, we will not be on the timeline to do an effective, like you could get away with it a little later if you really wanted to, but it would be hard, a national search. So we're effectively making that call right now. And I just want to that to me was the essence of that discussion. And I think that we're just looking for making sure that
5 board directors had voices to be able to be part of that.
So I will just speak quickly, since I think you guys were kind enough to, I think, essentially pull this off, maybe a little bit until I was here, but I realized we have 3 minutes. I did listen to that discussion, and I know that we at other points talked about sort of how we could ensure that we were essentially respectful of the desire that anything as monumental as this was done with the right level of diligence and not essentially in a hasty, what you would often call check the box kind of way. So I kind of swung around to, I originally thought, you know, getting that RFP underway increased our options, but I actually hear you and I agree, it actually limits it. And it's notable that I think most districts right now are losing superintendents just because it's not been an easy time to have that. So I guess I would be inclined to say, and I'll just share sort of my open opinion, that it makes more sense to take our time and to do a thorough and deep evaluation, as Dr. Weiss said, like considering how do we strike the right balance to consider internal as well as broader. And to do that, I think I would suggest maybe we consider, if Dr. Jarvis was amenable, to sort of extending his time to give our community and ourselves more time to do an evaluation of our needs. So that would be kind of where I'm coming out.
Thanks. I'm going to say we have a few extra minutes to make sure that everyone has some input in this discussion before we break. I'm ready to make a decision, but I understand that we can spend more time discussing this. We do have time on our calendars to be able to do that. So is there any further thoughts for today?
I mean, I pretty much said everything last time. I agree with Christine. We need to take care of our community. Everyone is excited to be back in schools and yet also really exhausted in the process of doing that. We have a critical levy in February that if there's going to be any external staff time applied to something, I think it needs to be that. And I don't think we move anything, but I'm inclined to wait. Due to diligence, as you said.
For me, yeah, sorry.
So I'll say I really liked Christine's summary of last time's conversation.
Yeah.
That seemed to
Took us
45
minutes. You did it in like 3.
Yeah, that was
Well
great. And I am inclined to just think just on a practical matter about the bandwidth that we have right now, the things that Eric has just said, you know, that are important coming up, but also really, you know, having the time for the community engagement. And also, I think we might even get better candidates next year, because right now all these districts are looking for people.
So I think for me, the bottom line is, at this point, the thing that I am prepared to do is to commit to not doing a national search this year. And to doing due diligence with our community and to using time to gather input and gather feedback and make sure that we're building a shared ownership and a shared set of voices for the whole journey. And I think that we have a chance to do that, and I think we should. And so I think that's the first decision that we need to make. And I know there'll be another decision that we need to make in a shorter time period. So like, you know, the next thing is, well, if you're not doing a national search this year, what are you going to do starting July 1st? And I think we have some time still to make that. And I don't think we need to draw that out to May or July or whatever. But I don't think we need to make that decision here tonight at this moment. I think that there's time to bring our community into that conversation.
Our community into the conversation for between now and what we do after July.
Yeah, potentially, but you know, in the appropriate structured way that is not over tapping anyone, but is tapping people appropriately and bringing them along the journey with us.
I think that the timeline to ensure that there's stability, especially going into the levy election, is shorter than that. I think it's, you know, we've been having these listening sessions, been talking, being back in person is great. There's just a lot more conversations. I really hear from a lot of staff that having the structure where we have now, part of the reason we brought on Dr. Jarvis as our interim was to bring in that capacity and allow all of our other staff to be able to focus and do their work, right, in supporting each other and supporting students, right, and supporting families, and really aiding in that recovery. And that we are moving along. That part has been successful, and to disrupt that or bring in uncertainty, I think would be challenging and set us back from what our goal was and what we have been achieving. And so I think that there is some urgency to making a decision. So I would propose, we have time on our calendars that we put for this process for next Thursday on the 28th. I think we blocked out 2 hours. So I propose we have that meeting. I'll send out an agenda on how we can structure that time to have more of a discussion around this.
Oh, good.
Okay. Dr. Watson? Yes? All right, Christian? Thank you. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you all very much. We can continue that discussion then. So that, unless there's anything else, I'm looking around here, that brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is adjournment. So we are, I believe it says adjournment. Okay, I just want to so for this meeting, we are adjourned. And then for directors, you really actually have a break. And then so that we can get ready for the ribbon cutting ceremony. So thank you everyone for participating in the meeting or joining us here this evening. And we look forward to the celebration that we're about to have. Thank you.